Kartal player. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhanhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhanhari. Yashodanandana Bhajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Stapad Paramahansa, Padavajaka Astotar that Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Padavajaka Astotar that Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. Sorry. Sorry. On this 18th day of April 2022 in San Diego, a reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in Chapter 3 entitled Karma Yoga, text 20, on page 157. Karmanaiva hi sangsiddhim astita janakadayah lokasangraham evapi sampashyan kartamarhasi karmanaiva hi sangsiddhim astita janakadayah lokasangaham evapi sampashyan kartamarhasi karmanaiva hi sangsiddhim astita janakadayah lokasangaham evapi sampashyan kartum arhasi karmanaiva hi sangsiddhim astita janakadayah lokasangaham evapi sampashyan kartum arhasi karmanaiva hi sangsiddhim Chita janakadayah lokasangaham evapi sampashyan kartamarhasi. Anyone else? Go ahead. Karmanaiva hi sangsiddhim astita janakadayah lokasangaham evapi sampashyan kartamarhasi. Mataji? No? Karmanaiva hi sangsiddhim astita janakadayah lokasangraham evapi sampashyan kartamarhasi. About 200% better than last time. You want to try, Mataji? Karmanaiva hi sangsiddhim astita janakadayah lokasangraham evapi sampashyan kartamarhasi. Anyone on Zoom?
Karmanaiva hi sangsiddhim
Karmanaiva hi sangsiddhim
astita janakadayah
astita janakadayah
lokasangraham evapi
lokasangraham evapi
sampashyan kartum arhasi
sampashyan kartamarhasi. Karmana, by work, eva, even, he, certainly, sangsiddhim, in perfection, astitaha, situated, janaka adayaha, Janaka and other kings, loka sangraham, the people in general, eva api, also, sampashyan, considering, kartum, to act, arhasi, you deserve. Translation. Kings such as Janaka attained perfection solely by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for the sake of educating the people in general, you should perform your work. Saul, can you make sure all the doors are closed? Thanks. Purport. Kings like Janaka were all self-realized souls. Consequently, they had no obligation to perform the prescribed duties in the Vedas. Nonetheless, they performed all prescribed activities just to set examples for the people in general.
Janaka was the father of Sita and father-in-law of Lord Sri Ram. Being a great devotee of the Lord, he was transcendentally situated. But because he was the king of Mithila, a subdivision of Bihar province in India, he had to teach his subjects how to perform prescribed duties. Lord Krishna and Arjuna, the Lord's eternal friend, had no need to fight in the battle of Kurukshetra. But they fought to teach people in general that violence is also necessary in a situation where good arguments fail. Before the battle of Kurukshetra, every effort was made to avoid the war, even by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the other party was determined to fight. So for such a right cause, there is a necessity for fighting. Although one who is situated in Krishna consciousness may not have any interest in the world, he still works to teach the public how to live and how to act. Experienced persons in Krishna consciousness can act in such a way that others will follow. And this is explained in the following verse. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandjana shalakaya chakshu unmilitam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this is reiterating this principle, very important principle, that those who are highly placed in society, certainly the Brahmanical class as well as the Kshatriyas, the kings, the leaders, they have a responsibility not only to rule, if you were, but also to show by example how to live a responsible life, dharmic life, Krishna conscious life. Anyone who's in a position of prominence like that has that responsibility. This is the origin of the word ācārya. I pointed this out yesterday. Ācārya means the behavior. So an ācārya has three qualifications. Ācārya who is teaching Krishna consciousness and passing on knowledge, Vedic wisdom. First is that he must know the śāstra, the scripture, very, very well, so that he can convince others and defeat the atheists. And he must act according to the śāstra, according to those principles. And then he must take the trouble to teach, which is often a risky affair. This was to see what happened to Jesus Christ. Yesterday we celebrated, well, we didn't celebrate, but the world celebrated Easter, and that commemorates the resurrection after the crucifixion. But he wasn't ready to compromise. Even though it was very dangerous, obviously, to preach God consciousness in that time and that place, he did it anyway because he knew that that was what the people needed. And that's what, for the greatest good, he did even sacrifice his life for that. So we find in our own line that that's also the case. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he took a procession to Vrindavan for parakram. But at that time, there were many dacoits, criminals, who were preying on pilgrims. And not only that, but he was challenging the rigid caste system where being born in a Brahmin family also automatically made you the head of society, and people would serve you, and that wasn't really the Shastric truth. You have to have the guna and karma, the qualities and the activities of a Brahmana. You could be recognized as a Brahmana. And he showed by his own in his own society how those who were born outside Brahmin families, even outside the Vedic culture, by training and by Krishna consciousness, they could come up to the Brahminical standard and be recognized as Brahmas within Gaudiya Math, which was his organization. So, this is what's being explained here with the example of Janaka. There's not so much about Janaka in the Srimad Bhagavatam, but he's very prominent within the Ramayana, of course, the father of Sita, great devotee. And he achieved perfection solely by performance of prescribed duties. So he performed his duty of a Kshatriya, as we're learning in the morning. Oftentimes the Bhagavatam and the Gita intersect. So there's a king that not many devotees, meditate on or something, but this king is named Gaya, who appears in the line coming down from Priyavrata. And he was just like Janaka. We just read it this morning. I gave class this morning. Where he was the ideal king. He showed by his behavior, an example, and he was very concerned that the people had enough yoga and kshema. This is a nice little phrase that appears in the Bhagavatam, where Krishna, in the 8th chapter, he will say, Ananyas chintayanto mam yejana paripasati tesham nityabhyuktanam yoga kshemam bhamyaham. Which means that those who are thinking of me without any deviation, really meditating on me, even in their ordinary life, but they're always seeing me everywhere, working for me, devotees. Ananyas chintayanto yejana paripasati, and worshiping me in this way. Tesham nityabhyuktanam, those who are thus always linked to me in devotion, I preserve what they have. I preserve what they have. What is it? I carry what they lack, and I preserve what they have. Thank you. So that's a way of saying I provide their material necessities, and I also provide for their security. When you think about it, these are the two things that you need to live. You may be a millionaire, and you may have all the things you need. You have a nice house, and you have all the food you eat and everything, electricity's on. But if you don't have security, if you're threatened by gangs, if somebody's coming to kill you, you're not happy. You're not peaceful. So both of those things have to be there. And Krishna says, I personally provide those for my devotees. So, but the king, or the pious king, the devotee king, Vaishnava king, he wants to make sure that the people have that everyone's doing their duty within the varnashram system, that the Brahmins are observing their Brahman dharma, which is to be teachers, which is to be pure and be renounced, and they're performing sacrifices, all the things that the Brahmins do. And the Kshatriyas, those who are leaders, they're meant to, they're naturally charismatic leaders, and they can be within part of the government. They themselves can be the king or leaders of, like that. But they also have certain qualities. They have to be ready to enforce the law, and ready to manage people and make sure that everyone's doing their right duty. And the mercantile men, now there's the Vaishyas, they're the ones who create wealth in a society, which means they're farmers, they're merchants, they're bankers, they're tradesmen, like that. And there's so many rules and regulations, what they have to do. Cow protection is a huge part of it. And then, of course, the Shudras, the largest class, the manual laborers, they're meant to serve the other classes, but they're not meant to be downtrodden and exploited. They're also honored as part of the varnashram system. And when you go to the 11th, I think it's in the 11th canto, there's a great description there. I think it's Narada Muni who describes the different varnas and ashrams. And the Shudras they're part of the varnashram. They have certain rules and regulations, moral rules that they have to follow. Otherwise, they're outcasts. They're not cast out, but they're outside the caste system. And so that's not good to be. So everyone has their role to play in the smooth working of society. But we learned at the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam that the essence of the varnashram system is bhakti. Atak pumbya dvija shrestha varnashrama vibhagashaha svanustitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam. You know that verse. She knows all the verses. So this is Sutta Goswami addressing these Dvija Shrestha, the best of the twice-born. There's a whole gathering in Naimisharanya, they're performing a sacrifice, and they're hearing the Bhagavatam as he heard it when Shukadev spoke it. Can you imagine? Sitting there, such focus of mind, such clear mind that 18,000 verses are spoken, and you listen to every one, and now you can repeat it. Amazing. So that's what he did. He was the son of Romaharshi and Suru, who had an unfortunate, it was fortunate he was killed by Balaram, but anyway, I won't get into that story. But he was appointed, and he was speaking, and he addresses them as the best of the twice-born. Dvija Shrestha Varnashram, when you come to the divisions of the Varna and Ashram, so the Varnas are these four. There's student life, brahmachari, and then mostly married life, and then retired and sannyas, nonce life. The ashrams are the Brahminical class. I'm sorry. Yeah, the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and Shudras. No, those are the Varnas. I'm sorry. The occupational divisions. The spiritual divisions meant for advancement spiritually through life is brahmacharya, which is student life, and then married life, and then renounced life. Not to stay 100% of the time in married life. That's the Vedic culture. But because life is meant for renunciation, and then retired, and then sannyas for those who are, So he says all of them find their perfection when they're engaged in for the satisfaction of Krishna. Sangsid here, the perfection, Hari Toshanam, for the satisfaction of Hari. So if bhakti is not the central principle in the varna and ashram, then it tends to degrade into the caste system, where you have people just being born in a caste, claiming privileges and lording it over the other caste, and becomes a mess. So when Krishna is in the center, things can become auspicious, and that's what we're trying to do here. So, any questions on this verse? The next one is very quotable. Yeah, got it.
Not a question, but I learned something new today, so I thought of sharing and also get it validated from you. So, Ram Chandra, right? His name is Chandra, but he's Suryavanshi.
Yeah.
And so I was like, because he was born when in the bright months of the year, and the sun didn't go for a few weeks or months when he was born, and moon didn't get the opportunity to see Lord Ram when he was born. So Lord Ram said, I'll keep my name as Chandra, just to please you, just to make you happy.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay, we go on. This next one is very often quoted. Yad yadachadati shreshtas tattadeve tarojanaha sayat pamanam kurute lokas tadanuvartate. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Purport. People in general always require a leader who can teach the public by practical behavior. A leader cannot teach the public to stop smoking if he himself smokes. Lord Chaitanya said that a teacher should behave properly before he begins teaching. One who teaches in that way is called ācārya, or the ideal teacher. Therefore, a teacher must follow the principles of śāstra to teach the common man. The teacher cannot manufacture rules against the principles of revealed scriptures. The revealed scriptures, like the Manu Samhita and similar others, are considered the standard books to be followed by human society. Thus, the leader's teaching should be based on the principles of such standard shastras. One who desires to improve himself must follow the standard rules as they are practiced by the great teachers. The Srimad Bhagavatam also affirms that one should follow in the footsteps of great devotees, and that is the way of progress on the path of spiritual realization. The king or the executive head of a state, the father and the school teacher are all considered to be natural leaders of the innocent people in general. All such natural leaders have a great responsibility to their dependents. Therefore, they must be conversant with standard books of moral and spiritual codes. So this is how society is maintained and nourished, actually, is by the passing on of worldview, moral codes, as well as ordinary knowledge. And it's not. This is a great lack often in modern education, concentrating more and more on the technical. How can I learn this and that about this particular field, finance, whatever it may be? And where is the training in moral codes, in philosophy of life, in Krishna consciousness? This is the chance of passing on the most valuable thing, the real truth and knowledge. And instead, we're passing on how to manipulate the material energy so that you can make more money, or which is ultimately self-defeating. Because here, what do we have today in society? We're sitting at the end of a whole progression, and it's not over yet, on technical development, the computers and all of the things in the spaceships and the communications. But what's actually happening is that the ability of nature to support human life is being destroyed. I mean, it's not that difficult to understand. With all of the carbon dioxide, it takes about 5 minutes to understand how that's working, isn't it? How burning the fossil fuels is causing more and more carbon dioxide, and now they have these methane that's bubbling up in the oceans. I don't know if you've read about that in the Arctic and everything, which is a lot more of a greenhouse gas than gold. And so it causes the heat to stay in the earth, and it's raising the temperatures, and the Antarctica is melting. You know, I'm not making it up. So that's the result of a complete mistake about what the goal of life is. When you get into this understanding based on sense gratification is the goal of life, then the whole society can be led astray if the leaders of society are also reinforcing that, the teachers and the leaders like that. And that's what's happened. It's an utter disaster. The only hope is the Krishna conscious movement. And you can see that in Krishna consciousness, if you're serious about it, you can be very satisfied and peaceful and happy with very little. Just look at Bhakti Soul. I was a brahmachari. I lived in the ashram, you didn't have any money. But everyone was coming down, the kirtans, and then on the street, more kirtan and preaching and a Sunday feast. And it's a very happy life. But it's not based on material aggrandizement or material thing. What does Rishabdev say? Nunam pramatta kudate vikarma yadindriya pritiya apinoti. This is his judgment, the great Lord Rishabdev, who's an incarnation of Krishna. It is certainly true, nuna means certainly, that those whose life is simply dedicated to indriya priti, which is directly translated as sense gratification, nunam kudate vikarma, that they're going to be performing vikarma. There's no question of activities according to the Vedas. It's just whatever works, which is usually very sinful, exploitative, and cruel. So nunam pamata kurute vikarma yadinipriya. And what's the result of such a life? Yes, there may be, if you're successful in beating down the other people, that you can enjoy something for a temporary amount of time. But how long is life really? I joined when I was 25. I'm now 74, and it just went like that. I mean, when you really think about it, it's not very long, We read about, people living 1,000 years, 10,000 years. No, 100 years at max, And then, so then what happens? So Rishabdev says, if you live that way, nasadu manye, he says, Nunam pamatta kurade vikarma yadnipite apane vinoti nasadamanne yatatmanam asanapi klesha da asadeya. So this which means that if you live such a life, you're sure to get another birth, and it's sure to be a life of suffering. Any birth in the material world is a life of, you got birth, old age, disease, and death, the threefold miseries. But if you're leading a very sinful life, then in between this life and the next one, you're going to go through a lot of pain. We're going to be reading that in the 5th canto. Hell is real. And then in the next life, because of all your sins, you'll be leading probably a subhuman life. And that's the result of all of your dreams of exploiting the material world. It's self-defeating. So actually there's a nice little lesson here. I'll just pursue it because all these things help each other. So the next verse he says, a very important verse. Prabhupada would quote these all the time. Padabhavas tavada bodha jato yavana jigyasata atma tattvam. Padabhavas means defeat. In the Vedic culture, you've been defeated. You haven't succeeded in your mission in life if you take birth again. So you're going to keep taking birth again in material bodies, not necessarily human, as long as that defeat is caused by ignorance, because you're in complete ignorance of who you are and what you should do. Tavad, abodha jato, means born out of ignorance. Yavan, so you have this tavad yavan. Very nice combination. Tavad yavan combination means, yavan means as long as, usually it's negative, as long as you don't do this, you won't get this. Or in this case, as long as you don't do this, You will get this, meaning another birth and suffering. So parabhavas tavad. You're gonna be getting defeated again and again, birth and after birth. Parabhavas tavad abodha jato, that defeat which is caused by ignorance. Yavana jigyatas atma tattvam. As long as you do not inquire into the Atma Tattva, the truth of the soul, the truth of the Supreme Soul, the relationship, in other words, Krishna conscious topics, the absolute truth. As long as you're inquiring into, what's the price of this, what's the price of this, how can I exploit this, where's food, there's going to be inquiry. But the real inquiry for human beings is, where did I come from? What does it all mean? Is there a God or isn't there a God? I mean, these kind of questions, absolute questions, What is this world? How did it come about? Those kind of questions need to enter our mind, and we need to find the proper source of the answer for those. That's another thing. But at least the question has to come. So then he says, Yavan atma tattvam, yavat kriyas. As long as you're not asking those questions, you're going to be acting, right in this chapter, karmically, fruitively. Yavat kriyas. Kriyas means activity that's not based on spiritual values. Yavat kriyas, as long as you're acting that way, tavid, your mind, tavid manovai karmatmakam, will be full of thoughts of fruitive activities. We're in the chapter called Karma Yoga. This is not Karma Yoga. He's describing just regular karma. Fruitive activity resulting in, if you're doing it according to Vedic rules, you maybe go up. But this is, he already said, it's going to be karma. So you suffer. You probably lose the human form of life. And it's a tragedy. You come in the human form of life, which alone you're able to inquire into these things and actually control the senses and practice devotion and make progress. And you're just wasted on Maya Sukhaya. This is Prahlad's vision. And when he's offering his prayers to Nrsingadev, he's saying that I have no problem. I am not disturbed at all. Again, something's open back there. I'm upstairs. Oh, okay. All right. Vaitarani River, between the material and spiritual world. You're all across that river, and I'm with you. And so I'm also across. I'm feeling completely liberated. I have no problems. You see? That's I know shoche. So therefore, na eva udvijay. I'm not disturbed at all, because, and this is very key, because we can also do this. Wherever I am, I can always sing your glories and dive into an ocean of happiness in my mind and be completely happy. And that, we maybe not be able to memorize so many shlokas, but you can memorize one. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the more that we chant and cultivate this consciousness of Krishna through the chanting, we can take shelter of that holy name, and we can be happy and peaceful even when there's so much confusion around us. So this is what Prahlad said. But then he also said, I have no problem. I can put my mind in an ocean of nectar, magna chitta. But shote tato. Then he says, I'm lamenting. Why are you lamenting? Vimukachetasa indriyata maya sukhaya. These fools and rascals, these mudhas he calls them, who are trying to enjoy flickering sense gratification and paving their way to hell, basically. Maya sukhaya baramudbhato. Meaning they're bearing a great burden of arranging for sense gratification, making the money, arranging it. It's a big burden. But what's the big burden? To chant Hare Krishna. You can do it anytime. You can be, who's on the cover? Krishna. He's the reservoir of pleasure. So Prabhupada is speaking on this verse. The featured article in that little pamphlet, it's only about 20 pages, is a transcript of a lecture Prabhupada gave on this verse in the second chapter, first canto. Some of you may know this verse. You know it. Shinvatam Sukata Krishna, Punya Shavana Kirtana. This is the end of a little lesson that Sutta Goswami gives to the sages concerning what is real Dharma. There's a book out there called Dharma, the Way of Transcendence. And it's based on the verses from first canto, second chapter, text 6, through first canto, second chapter, text 21. Those verses, which comprise, I think, 16 verses, are like a complete lesson in Krishna consciousness. And so, near the end there, he told, Shrinvatam Sukata Krishna. When Krishna in your heart, because he's in all of our hearts as a super soul, he's there. When he understands that someone is sincerely hearing about him, then he purifies. Shrinvatam Sakata Krishna, Punya Shavana Kirtana. To hear and chant about whom, Krishna, brings piety in and of itself. Not material piety, but Bhaktion Mukhi Sukriti. This means that pious activity which produces bhakti. So Punya Shravana Kirtana. Hridyantaksto, Krishna who's within the heart, the Hriday, the heart. Yabhadrani Vidunoti. Abhadras are the unwanted things in our hearts. All of these desires for sense gratification, the fears, the grudges we're holding, and the aspirations for material things and ignorance. And all of these things are unwanted and not necessary. So Krishna is cleaning them away, polishing away. Vidunoti, he's doing it. Surit Satam, because he is the best friend, best wishing friend of the sincere devotees. And it describes how that cleansing process, which is nothing but what Lord Chaitanya describes, Chaito Darpana Marjanam, by the chanting of the holy name. Eventually, one begins to actually understand one's real spiritual nature, and it culminates in seeing Krishna in the heart, being situated in one's actual Sarup, and being ready on your way back to Godhead. All just by hearing and chanting. Chiefly the holy name, but there's so many other things to hear and chant. So where's the big expense for that? You see? So back to Rishabdev. So he says, if you act fruitively, especially sinfully, and then your mind will always be filled with these karma ideas, with these fruitive desires, and with all of the fears and anxieties that come from not being able to do that, and all these things. In other words, it's not a good place to be. So then the last verse, he has a wonderful coda, Evam mana karma vasham payunkte. Karma vasham means under the force of karma. In other words, the mind is the key. The mind is the vehicle for your transmigration, and the mind can be your best friend. Can spontaneously remember Krishna and take you back to God if you cultivate it that way. But here the mind is karmatmakam, full of karmic ideas. So here he says, Evamana karma vasham payunkte avidyatmanubhidiyada. When there's so much ignorance, avidya, of who you are, then you have to act in this way, and you form this fruit of mentality in the mind, and that takes you to your next birth, material birth. Therefore, the conclusion is, Pritir nayavan maya vasudeve namuchate dehi yogena tavat. Pritir nayavan, as long as there is not love for me, Vasudev. Now Rishabdev reveals, I am Vasudev, an expansion of Krishna. Vasudev is a name for Krishna. Pritir nayavan maya vasudeve namuchate dehi yogena tavat. As long as you don't develop love for Krishna, you will not be liberated from the bondage of birth and death in a material body. And we should always remember that in the cultivation of bhakti, of love for Krishna, by this process, then this liberation is a byproduct. It's not something that we're aspiring for and praying to Krishna for. We should pray to Krishna for love, for the opportunity to serve him with love and devotion. That's the perfection. That please, remove this darkness in my heart so that the natural love for you will awaken. Bhujanga the Pachandaka Spuda the Kandachu Danko de Nirankashadra Ganchada Brahmina Buddha Bringa Brahme Patanga to Hitustati Vanakuti the Kedi Priye Padaspuda to Me Mohus Twayamukunda Shuddharati. You know this one? It's a very nice verse. So we say, you wear the best of crests, a crown of perfect peacock plumes. Your dancing glances stun the bees meandering midst the blooms. You relish love play in a cottage by Kalindi's shore. O Krishna, may pure love for you be mine forevermore. There's many prayers like that the Goswamis give us. So we can pray like that. Queen Kunti prayed like that. Tvayame ananya vishaya mati madhupate sakrit ratamund vahatara gange vaugamudanviti. You know this one? You've heard it? Kunti's prayers? You don't remember this one? This is near the end. She says, "Oh, Madhu's Lord," because he was the Lord of the Madhu dynasty, But it's not unfamiliar name, so I put Madhava in there. "Oh, Madhava, please ever fill my mind with thoughts of thee, not any other kind. As Ganges torrent flows into the sea, let all my love flow constantly to thee. Let my mind always think of you, and let my heart go to you. It's simple prayer. And if we act in such a way to cultivate that consciousness, that's pure Krishna consciousness. And then liberation will take care of itself. And, we'll rejoin Krishna back in the spiritual world. So I've kind of taken it a little far away from yad yad ācārya śreshtas. But this ācārya principle is there in any society. Whether it's someone who's at the top who's very moral and virtuous and gives a great example, or it's some demon at the top and he's causing everyone to go to hell. That it's so important. Why does Krishna come? To reinstitute Dharma. Because the kings, right, have forgotten they've become corrupted. So, when the kings and the leaders and the soldiers, they all then it's a very dangerous situation in society. So Krishna mentions that at the beginning of the 4th chapter. But the principle is there, and the Krishna consciousness movement is meant to, as Prabhupada said, create Brahmins who can be teachers and be examples in society. And so, Prabhupada was a great success all over the world. But we still have a lot of work to do. Any questions on this verse? Yad yad ācārya śreshtas. We kind of went a little far afield, but... All right, let's do 22. We have time. Name partasti kartavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana nanavaptam avaptavyam varta eva cha karmani. O son of Pritha, there is no work prescribed for me within all the 3 planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I a need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in prescribed duties. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is described in the Vedic literatures as follows. Tam Ishwaranam Padamam Maheshwaram Tam Devatanam Padamam Chadaivatam Patim Patinam Padamam Parastad Vidama Devam Bhuvanesham Idhyam Natasikaryam Karanam Cha Vidyate Natat Samasyabhyadikascha Drishyate Padasya Shakti Vivadhaiva Shruyate Swabhaviki Gana Bala Kriyacha. All entities are delegated within the particular power only by the Supreme Lord. They are not supreme themselves. He is also worshipable by all demigods and is the supreme director of all directors. Therefore, he is transcendental to all kinds of material leaders and controllers and is worshipable by all. There is no one greater than him, and he is the supreme cause of all causes. Okay, and the next one is in quote marks. Okay. Oh, I didn't read the beginning. The Supreme Lord is the controller of all other controllers, and he is the greatest of all the diverse planetary leaders. Everyone is under his control. All entities are delegated with particular power only by the Supreme Lord. Okay, so we read that part. Going on, 2nd verse. He does not possess a bodily form like that of an ordinary living entity. There is no difference between his body and his soul. He is absolute. All his senses are transcendental. Any one of his senses can perform the action of any other sense. Therefore, no one is greater than him or equal to him. His potencies are multifarious, and thus his deeds are automatically performed as a natural sequence. It's Shvedashtra Upanishads 6, 7 to 8. Since everything is in full opulence in the personality of Godhead and is existing in full truth, there is no duty for the Supreme Personality of Godhead to perform. One who must receive the results of work has some designated duty, but one who has nothing to achieve within the 3 planetary systems certainly has no duty. And yet Lord Krishna is engaged on the battlefield of Kurukshetra as the leader of the Kshatriyas, because the Kshatriyas are duty-bound to give protection to the distressed. Although he is above all the regulations of the revealed scriptures, he does not do anything that violates the revealed scriptures. So here, we'll see in the in the text 24, Krishna's going that if he didn't do anything, he would be responsible for Varna Sankara. In other words, everyone's looking to Krishna; he's the leader, and if he starts acting irresponsibly, then everyone will act irresponsibly, and society will go to hell. You remember Arjuna? This was Arjuna's argument at the beginning. He wanted to give up his duty. so that so many men wouldn't be killed and the women would be unprotected, and there'll be Varnasankara, means unwanted population that's not properly trained. But Krishna is saying, no, I'm doing my duty, and if I didn't, then people would follow my example, and there would be Varnasankara. So he's using Arjun's argument against him. So Krishna himself, especially in his latter days in Dwarka, he was Narada Muni came to see what Krishna was doing. He had these 16,108 palaces. He would go from one to the other. And you see Krishna's doing, he's getting his children married. He's going to the sabha. He's getting up early in the morning and meditating. In other words, he's leading the life of an ideal householder. Because he's Yajyadatari Shrestha. He's the Shrestha. He's the most respectable, obviously, in all. So Krishna feels that when he comes in that role, that he should act in that way because he's the example. So you always bring it back to what, so Arjun, you should also be a good example and do your duty, because he wants him to fight in the war, but in the case of Krishna, he's giving the example of how to lead a Krishna conscious life. He would get up early in the morning, and he would meditate. He wouldn't go to a temple, but he would meditate. He would meditate on himself. He had to meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Well, doesn't mean we meditate on ourselves. We come and meditate on Krishna by coming to Mangalarti, you see. But the whole idea is that, yes, the early morning, and even though, he said the queens were disgusted. Prabhupada said they're disgusted because he would get out of bed early, and take a bath, put on tilak, and sit down and meditate. But the whole point is that those who are in positions of responsibility have the responsibility to be good examples, and this very much is true within the society of Krishna consciousness. So these are important instructions, and Krishna is saying, I'm very dutiful, even though I have no duty to perform. This is natasya karyam. Karyam is a duty. Natasya karyam. Because nobody is equal to him. And yet still, as he says it right here, that he performs duties because to be a good example. So what to speak of us? We should be very dutiful and become gurus, as Lord Chaitanya says, on my order. In other words, become examples. Who else is going to do it? Right? We have to be the ones to teach others about Krishna consciousness and invite them into the family of Krishna's devotees. Okay, any discussion on these points? Go ahead, Saul.
Hare Krishna. Just real quick, it says his senses can perform the actions of all his other senses.
Yes.
What does that mean exactly?
You don't read the Brahma Samhita? Angani yasta sakalendriya vittimanti. We offer prasadam on the altar every day, right? So you carefully put the plate out, you ring the bell, you say the mantra. And then you go off the altar to allow the Lord to partake of the offering. And then you come back and it's all there. So how does he eat it? He says, I eat it. He says in the 9th chapter, patram pushpam param toyam yome bhakti apayachati tadaham bhakti paritam. Ashnami prayata. Ashnami means I eat. If someone offers me with devotion and love, within the category of fruits, flowers, vegetarian, nicely prepared, I will eat it. I will eat it. You see, how does he eat it? By looking at it. I don't know. I'm sorry.
We offer with a lot of love, so that's what he's.
That's what he's interested in. Yeah, but he's interested. He'll like I was just reading the story of Sudama Brahman. Where it reminds me of the pastime with Raghunath Das Goswami and Lord Chaitanya, the same exact thing. So Sudama Brahma was so poor, he was thin, he couldn't eat properly, But he had been a school classmate of Krishna's when he went to Gurukul in Ujjain, after he killed Kamsa. He took on the role of the son of Vasudeva while he needed to get ready for the thread. So he and Balaram went to Ujjain to study under Sandipani Muni. And he was, a humble brahmachari going out into the woods, getting wood with Sudama. And it was a big storm. I would say that probably Krishna arranged that storm. But anyway, it was a storm. And they were out all night, and everything. And so the next morning, sometime Dipani was very worried about them. He came out with all of the students, and they finally found him. He praised him. Oh, you've sacrificed so much. So anyway, Sudama Brahman, when he was older, he was very, very poor and emaciated, and he and his wife were living, very. So finally, his wife said, because she wanted to help her husband, she said, "Listen, you're Krishna's friend. He's the husband of the goddess of fortune. Go to Dwarka and see if you can." So he didn't want to go for that reason, but he said, okay. His wife said, and then he realized, oh, I'll get to see Krishna again, so I'll go. So he's going there. He's very skinny. He doesn't have proper clothes. Bedraggled. But as soon as Krishna sees him, oh, there's Sudama. He gives him a big hug. You can imagine. And he invites him in, and there he sits him on the same bed that Rukmini uses, and then he washes his feet, and it's the most delightful thing. They made a radio play out of it. Did you ever hear that? They made it in New Dwarka. Very nice. And anyway, so I completely forgot why I got to telling that story. But eventually, Sudama, because of the eating. So his wife said, well, I have to take something for him. He said, okay, we don't have anything, so I'll beg something. So he begs a little flat rice, which is the cheapest kind of rice, right? She put a little in the corner of his chadar, So Krishna, after the second day, he said, did you bring something for me? So he was ashamed. He's sitting in this, you can imagine, a palatial, room. Everything's ivory and jewels and gold, and he's got his little, chipped rice. He said, so Krishna said, what do you got there? You've got, let me take that, So oh, this is the best. And you were going to eat some more. Rukmini said, no, don't take any more, it's not for you. So Sudama left. Krishna didn't give him anything. He didn't give him a piece of gold or, anything like that. And Sudama said, Krishna is so kind. He felt like he was in Vaikuntha. He really was, And so he said, but he knew that I would lose, my equipoise if I had some wealth. So he kept me, without it. So then he gets home and he says, what's this? His home had been transformed into palaces, and there were demigods and demigoddesses, serving him, and his wife was dressed like the goddess of fortune. So he realized, Krishna, this is what Krishna did, So, yes, Krishna can perform the function of anything, with any of his senses. This is part of what it means to be God. Okay, all glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. I gave you a poem. Everybody dies, nobody dies. Wake up, and open your eyes. You're not that body, you're a pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and attain life's goal. Actually, I changed it. It's not everybody dies because it sounds like everybody. It's supposed to be each and everybody dies, or every single body dies. Nobody dies. In other words, the body dies, but the soul doesn't. All right, we'll meet again tomorrow. I'll have more poems. And we'll start with text 23, was it? Yeah. 23, okay. Thank you, Saul. He's been here longer than me.